Naomi Carter was a young owner of a small restaurant, Carter's Diner, located in Willow Creek, a town that no longer held the same hopes it once did. The commerce was in decline, familiar faces had disappeared, and many still struggled to survive. Naomi, however, was one of the few who still believed in her business. The family legacy kept her strong there, even when everything around her seemed to crumble. Her father, a strong man in his youth, was now ill, and she found herself caring for him. With the same dedication she gave to the restaurant, the days were long and the nights solitary. The town didn't help much to keep her spirits up. Each month seemed harder to keep things afloat. The narrow streets, once full of life, were now silent, with the few residents keeping their heads down, trying to handle their own problems. Naomi felt a sadness in the air, a melancholy that seemed to have taken over the place, as if the town was waiting for something that would never come. Still, she didn't give up. Food had always been Naomi's way of connecting with people, and the diner was, for her, a piece of what was left of a Willow Creek that still had some essence, some value. That day, Naomi was behind the counter, serving coffee as usual. The sound of the doorbell rang, and she looked up to see a man walk in, dressed in a black leather jacket with the emblem of a Hell's Angel on the back. The tension in the town was palpable whenever someone with a gang jacket appeared. People would whisper, look sideways, and move as far away as possible. It was as if this man, with his serious posture and presence carrying a shadowy past, brought with him a weight that not everyone was willing to bear. But Naomi didn't hesitate. She saw him as just another customer, another person seeking refuge, a hot cup of coffee, a place to rest for a moment. Without fear, she smiled, and with the same kindness she extended to anyone, she asked him to sit down. The man, with his tough look and closed-off demeanor, asked for coffee. Naomi stepped away to prepare the drink, feeling the stares of the other customers, who remained silent, watching the scene with discomfort. But she knew there was no time to care about others' judgments. She had a job to do, and at that moment, the focus was on her customer. The tension in the room increased, but Naomi didn't let it affect her. She was there to do what she knew best, serve with respect, without discrimination. She believed that, in the end, a small gesture of kindness could be more powerful than any stigma. Time seemed to stop in that tense moment, but Naomi remained steady. The sound of the coffee being poured into the cup was almost a melody in the midst of the uncomfortable silence that filled the diner. When she took the drink to the biker's table, the stares from the other customers were like invisible arrows, but Naomi didn't let it show. She handed the coffee with a calm smile, as though it were just another daily service, like any other. The man looked at her with gratitude, and his eyes, which had seemed hard and cold before, now held a rare softness. He didn't say anything, only grabbed the coffee and gave a small nod, a gesture of respect. Naomi, in turn, didn't think of anything but the work still to be done, but something in that look told her that he wasn't just any customer. She felt that this encounter wouldn't be just another in the everyday routine of her diner. It wasn't long before the situation took an unexpected turn. When two police officers entered the diner, the tension that was already present intensified even more. They approached the biker with a posture that immediately made it clear they were not there for a friendly conversation. Naomi noticed the shift in the atmosphere. The silence of the customers became heavier, and she knew that this moment could destabilize everything she had worked to build. The officers, with accusing looks, began to interrogate the man, trying to intimidate him with harsh words. Naomi felt an impulse in her chest. She couldn't allow this to happen there, not in her restaurant. She knew the town had its prejudices, but in her establishment, everyone was treated with respect. With firm steps, she approached the officers and, in a calm but assertive voice, asked them to leave. "Here, he's just a customer, and he will be treated as such," she said, and the room fell silent. Naomi's gesture, simple but filled with courage, changed. the atmosphere in that moment. The officers hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by Naomi's stance. The entire town knew she had always been calm and reserved, a woman of few conflicts, focused on what truly mattered. Seeing this calm figure confront two authorities in that way made the other customers in the restaurant even more tense. But in those seconds, Naomi realized something she couldn't ignore. The injustice being done wasn't just against that man, but against the very principle of humanity she carried in her heart. Without more words, the officers exchanged glances, muttered something incomprehensible, and reluctantly left the diner. The tension in the room didn't disappear immediately, but Naomi's courage made her feel a strange peace, as if she had made the right decision, even if no one around her understood. The biker looked at her again, now with a gentler gaze, and Naomi realized he was deeply grateful. He didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. A simple gesture of kindness could be more valuable than 1,000 words. The rest of the day passed, but the feeling that something had changed lingered in the air. Naomi was finishing up her shift when the biker stood up to leave. He walked toward the door, but before exiting, he looked at Naomi one last time. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. Naomi smiled, not expecting anything more than that. For her, that gesture was enough. He didn't need to say anything else. When he walked away, she continued with her routine, trying not to think too much about the event. But destiny seemed unwilling to let her forget. The next day, when she opened the diner doors, an unusual sight awaited her. A row of leather motorcycles was lined up outside. Naomi stopped for a moment, not knowing what to do. Where were these bikes from? Why so many? And before she could process what was happening, a group of bikers walked into the restaurant, some wearing the same Hell's Angels emblems as the man from the previous day. Naomi was taken aback, but something told her that what was happening there was just the beginning of something much bigger. The bikers began entering the diner one by one, greeting Naomi with a smile or a nod, as if they had already felt at home. They didn't seem threatening, on the contrary. There was an energy of respect and camaraderie among them. Naomi looked around, surprised by the number of people who had arrived. She couldn't understand how all of this was happening. But something in her heart told her that this moment, this unexpected intervention, was more important than anything she had planned for the day. The regular customers, who had already seemed accustomed to the diner's routine, were now divided between shock and delight. Some seemed bothered, others watched with curiosity. But Naomi felt a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. Something was changing in the air, something she couldn't control, but also didn't want to let pass. One of the bikers approached Naomi, a burly man with grey hair and a visible tattoo on his arm. He seemed to be the leader of the group, or at least the most vocal. "That man yesterday, Hank. He talked about you. Said you were one of the few people who didn't look at him with judgment but with respect," he said, looking at her with a sincere expression. "We came here to show our gratitude." Naomi, confused, looked at the other bikers who, in turn, just nodded in silence. There was no hostility, no arrogance, just a silent loyalty, an unspoken understanding between them. Naomi didn't know what to say. She hadn't done it expecting any kind of return. In her mind, she was just doing what was right. But seeing this sudden support, coming from people she never imagined, made her reflect on the power that a simple act of kindness could generate. Something had changed, and she felt that, unknowingly, she had become part of something much bigger than herself. The diner, which had until then been just Naomi's workplace, transformed that morning into a vibrant space of interaction and exchange. The bikers sat down, laughed, and talked with the other customers. Many of them were now opening their minds to what once seemed unattainable. The idea that people from completely different worlds could indeed live together peacefully. Naomi watched it all with a mix of surprise and gratitude. She had never imagined that her simple act of defending Hank, a stranger, could result in something so grand. When the group of bikers finished eating, one of them stood up and walked to the counter. He left a generous payment and before leaving said, "We're not here just for Hank. We're here for you, Naomi, for showing us that a little respect can change everything." Naomi's heart tightened and she felt an overwhelming emotion fill her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but right then, in that moment, she felt that something profound had been set in motion. The news about what happened at the diner spread quickly throughout Willow Creek. The town, which had long been marked by distrust and division, began to see Naomi in a different light. Conversations in the streets, once murmured with suspicion, now turned toward her courage, her ability to look beyond appearances and treat everyone with the same respect. Carter's Diner, once just a simple eating spot, was now becoming a symbol of change. People from different backgrounds, different social classes, began to frequent the place. Bikers, local workers, and even people from neighboring towns came together, sharing a meal and stories, putting aside the prejudice that had been nurtured for so long. Naomi felt a wave of transformation, not only in her life, but also in the community around her. She knew she couldn't change everything, but she was certain that she had taken the first step toward a new Willow Creek. As the weeks went by, the atmosphere in the diner became more welcoming. The flow of people diversified, and Naomi realized that without planning, she had created a place where everyone felt welcome. Breakfast became more than just a meal. It was an opportunity for conversation, for sharing stories, for setting aside differences and focusing on what united people. The smell of fresh coffee and the sound of animated conversations blended, creating an atmosphere Naomi had never imagined. She, who once felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, now felt that she was doing something important. The diner had become a place where people gathered to learn from one another, to overcome barriers. Naomi knew the town still had a long way to go, but she was sure that she had taken the first step to make that happen. That day, while Naomi cleaned the tables and organized the utensils, she stopped for a moment and looked at the door. The bell rang again, and she saw a group of young people enter, all wearing leather jackets, the same Hell's Angels emblem. But, unlike the first time, there was no tension in the air now. There was respect. Naomi greeted them with a smile, and one of them, a young man with black hair and a beard, approached her. "We came here to thank you, Naomi. You changed everything. You showed that. When someone puts themselves in another's shoes, they can transform the lives of many people. And that's what you did here." Naomi felt a lump in her throat, but she didn't let it show. She just smiled and said, "I just did what was right." The young man nodded and before leaving, left a generous tip. Naomi watched the group leave, and a feeling of peace filled her. She knew that in that moment, Willow Creek had made an important leap. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew that, right there, in that little diner, something had happened that would forever change the lives of everyone who passed through that place. As the months passed, Naomi realized that the diner had become more integrated into the life of Willow Creek. What started as a small act of courage had become a meeting point, a symbol of respect and unity. She spent more time talking with her customers, listening to their stories, and becoming a trusted figure in the town. Her father, though still weakened by illness, smiled more than ever. The town seemed more alive, more connected. It wasn't just the diner that had changed, but also the people who frequented it. Naomi didn't see this as a personal achievement, but as a reflection of a larger movement she had unknowingly started. What once seemed impossible, the union of different worlds, the overcoming of prejudice, was now happening right before her eyes. Deep down, Naomi knew that the change wouldn't come from just one person, but from the whole community. What she did was simply open the way, set an example that it's possible to act with empathy without looking back in fear of others' judgment. She hadn't imagined that a simple act of kindness could generate such transformation. but she was happy to have been part of it. In the following days, the diner continued to be a meeting place for people from different backgrounds, but now, more than ever, Naomi felt that place reflected her own evolution. She didn't care what the future held, because she knew that on some level she had already made a difference. Her diner had become a symbol of hope and unity, and that was more than she could have asked for. The town in some way seemed more united, and for her, that was the greatest reward of all. Naomi still reflected on everything that had happened, but with time, the memories of that tense day began to soften. What had once seemed like a solitary battle against prejudice and division now seemed part of something bigger, a wave of change spreading through Willow Creek. She wasn't sure of the exact impact her action had on each person, but she saw the small transformations happening daily in her customers. More open conversations, less distrustful gazes, and even apologies from people who had once judged her. That made her smile, but it also made her feel the responsibility of what she had created. It wasn't something simple. It was a legacy she was building, a legacy that would show future generations what courage and respect could do for a community. On the night of one of those quiet days, as Naomi prepared to close the doors of the diner, she looked out the window and saw the sunset illuminating the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Something inside her stirred, a feeling of gratitude for the journey she had lived and for the town that was slowly changing. She hadn't done it all alone, but she had been the catalyst that started the transformation. Carter's Diner, once just a simple restaurant, had now become a symbol of something much larger. And even though the town still had its challenges, Naomi knew that, with the support of the people by her side, it was possible to face any obstacle. She took a deep breath and smiled to herself, knowing that she had done the best she could. Her work, though simple, was a reflection of her belief that small gestures can generate big changes. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and went home with a light heart and a peaceful soul. Slowly, the story of Naomi and Carter's Diner began to be told by others. That simple diner, once just another stop in Willow Creek, had become an example that, with courage and kindness, it's possible to transform realities. The town, which had seemed so small and full of prejudice, was now more open, more willing to listen and embrace. The changes that had started that day, when Naomi intervened in defense of a stranger, were slowly reshaping the town. Naomi wasn't seeking recognition, but people started visiting her, wanting to meet the woman who had given the community a new direction. It was as if her small act of courage had planted a seed, and now it was beginning to bloom, creating a new identity for the town. In the following days, Naomi began to look at her life and her town with a new perspective. She realized how small actions could have a lasting impact. Every day she saw people greeting each other with more respect, even those who had once avoided one another. The feeling of division was gradually being replaced by a sense of community. Carter's Diner, which had once been just a refuge for a few, was now a place of welcome and unity, where everyone felt part of something bigger. Naomi had become not just the restaurant owner, but also a sort of guardian of the spirit of unity that had blossomed in Willow Creek. She knew that the transformation was a continuous process, but even so, she could feel that something deep had changed, something that would never be erased. Time passed and Willow Creek began to reinvent itself. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but rather gradual, made up of small steps and daily gestures. Carter's Diner became a symbol of this, a constant reminder that change can come from where you least expect it. Naomi, with her simplicity and courage, was the quiet force that propelled that revolution at the heart of the town. She never saw herself as a hero, but in the eyes of many, that's what she became. And though Willow Creek's past still echoed through the town's corridors, the new generations began to learn that respect and empathy were the keys to a better future. The scars of prejudice didn't disappear overnight, but Naomi knew that, with time, They would heal, and the town would become a fairer place for all. In the years that followed, Carter's Diner continued to thrive. Naomi's routine, though still full of challenges, was lighter now. She saw the diner becoming not just a meeting place, but also a space for reflection and learning. Each customer who came in carried a different story, and Naomi, with her welcoming manner, continued to be the link that connected those stories, uniting differences in a way that was almost invisible, but essential. The town of Willow Creek, which once seemed paralyzed by fear and distrust, now found itself more vibrant, more alive. What had started as a small act of kindness, an intervention in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, had turned into something much larger, something that would touch generations to come. And looking toward the future, Naomi knew that, despite the challenges, her small town was finally heading in the right direction. Naomi Carter's story, of a simple act that changed the fate of an entire place, would forever be marked in Willow Creek. She was no longer just the owner of Carter's Diner, but now was seen as the woman who, with her courage, had created a new path for the town. Future generations would tell her story, reminding everyone that small acts of empathy can make all the difference. Naomi's legacy was not in grand deeds, but in the way she, with her quiet actions, had rewritten the town's destiny. She understood that sometimes it's in the simplest of situations that the deepest changes occur. And as the town continued to transform, Naomi went on with her routine, calm and content, knowing that by doing what was right, she had helped create a slightly fairer and more welcoming world. That late afternoon, when the sun began to set, Naomi sat in one of the empty chairs of the diner, looking out the window. She knew she didn't need recognition, that her role there had never been about seeking fame or applause. But as she watched people coming in and out, she felt an immense inner peace. There was something in her soul telling her that somehow she had fulfilled her role. The small Carter's Diner had become the center of a silent revolution, and she, unknowingly, was the guardian of that transformation. Naomi knew that the change she had helped initiate in Willow Creek might not be visible on a large scale, but it was there, in the small things, in the friendlier glances, in the more open conversations, in the town that now had hope. She smiled, calm, and turned off the diner's lights for the last time that day, with the certainty that in time everything had changed.